Hello, Jai Bhim, Jai Savitri Johar. Thanks a lot for having me here. And today I'm very happy to be here at MOG with these amazing people who, for the past, 1 week, have been so nice to me and have been, helping me to put my first solo exhibition in a gallery setup. So thanks a lot, MOG, for having me here. And thanks a lot for Goa for always being inspiring, the amazing people, the amazing flora and fauna that keeps on inspiring. And I think, for any human being to create, if they are near somewhere, which is as beautiful, as progressive as Goa, I think that would be an amazing thing. I hope the whole country becomes like Goa. So today I'm going to talk about we the people and bracket two that we the people who are sometimes not shown in the mainstream, and if they are shown in the mainstream they are shown like this broken people who are trying to collect waste, not colorful people doing very interesting work, shaving people's cutting their hair, making percussions, making baskets, making leather out of dead animals. But we were always colorless, even though what we were producing was all colorful. But somehow that mainstream has always, seen us with the gaze of a vulture that, that is seeing from up and, seeing somebody below. So I think when I started creating stuff, I realized that I was orphaned from history. So it was a difficult process for me to create. Even though I would love to make journals, I would love to collect motifs, collect leaves, collect sand, stones, and other things, and write poetry. But it was very difficult for me to bring it out because I thought that my history or my expression doesn't matter because that's what it has shown to me. I was shown that rasas and bhavas come only in the form of worshipping of gods. I was never, but and I could never find these gods. These temples did not allow my presence, or if I have to enter a temple, I'll have to lie that I come from such and such a caste so that they can let me enter. But I realized that this is not the end of my community. That this black and white perception of my community, this broken, shattered people. This is not us. We have been living ever since any other human being has been living. We have evolved. We have survived till now, going through all these plagues and wars. So it is not that we are lesser humans or anything, but it was made to us. It was made to believe to us that we are born even out of the great almighty that exists. So how are we a part of a religion, how we are a part of a culture which whose god doesn't accept us? And while I was looking around, I started to see colors. It actually started to happen in Milan when I was studying in Milan for an exchange semester, when I found my first educator with whom I could discuss where I come from, my identity. I would talk about my identity a little bit. When I was in fourth standard, I first saw the first instance of caste. I was in a birthday party of one of my classmates, and they were all discussing this one girl's surname, which was an alphabet. Let's say it was B. So they were discussing that this girl in fourth standard, mind it, they were discussing that she does not have a surname. That means that she must be a scheduled caste, and in a in a slurred form. It was not scheduled caste, not a constitutional term. And in the fourth standard, I started developing this inferiority complex that if my caste comes out, then people will not be friends with me. I will have less opportunities. So everything that my father, my mother used to talk about, that how you get less opportunities because of belonging to these castes, I felt so afraid that I started to hide my caste. I would never invite my classmates to my home to celebrate my birthday, because if they'll come to my home, they'll see an Ambedkar and they'll say that, oh, he's a Dalit and let's not be friends. Maybe it was just my inferiority complex, but I had to live with that. Then, when my school was over, I was going to study in Bombay, and I thought that life will change from here because Bombay is a progressive city. Bombay is high rises. Bombay is casteless. In Bombay I'll see only class, but that didn't happen. The first day when I went to my college, and since there was no hostel there, and I remember that there was this one beautiful house on 14th floor. I had never seen a high rise, with 14th floor, and the breeze that was coming inside was amazing. Now I can afford to have this house, and we just before we were finishing the deal with the property dealer, this one person started this conversation that my surname is Kumar, but I am a Bhumihari Brahmin. And then the second person started to say that I am a Ranjan, but I am this. And then third person said, I am this, my surname is this, and I am this. And when it came to me, I really wanted that house, and I said that I am Siddhesh Gautam and I am a Brahmin. And that day I became a Brahmin and lived like a Brahmin for most of my college. For that I had to learn a lot of things to be a Brahmin. To justify a lie, you have to continuously live that lie. And you have to continuously, learn more about your own oppressor. You become that oppressor, and you sit in those circles where these very liberal people talk ill about or malicious about different castes and different people. I remember one such conversation when I was in second year of my class, and these all, most of my classmates were communists and, very progressive people. And, they were discussing that how the people from Northeastern can only learn skills. They cannot develop new ideas. So this was what used to happen, inside these circles of the liberal people, and how they would talk about other people. And since Northeastern people have started to come very, recently in these colleges, now these representations were not, looking good to these people, even though they were liberal outside, though they would talk about Karl Marx outside. But I felt very lonely in that. So, like in this illustration, I'm trying to see, at the word in this traffic, where Ambedkar is behind me. It took me, so I finished my undergraduation. I went to my master's in NID, and I thought that, I would not take the risk of now, not being you know, an upper caste. So there I continued my life that, I'm a Brahmin. So on the first day of NID, I remained a Brahmin. So, and there was this one mistake that NID did with me, and it was to send me abroad for an exchange semester. Now this time I was going to Italy, to Milan for 6 months, and there I thought that these teachers, if I'll tell them anything, it doesn't matter. Because, they can't judge me, or there is no point. I'll just return and they'll just forget me. So I found this one interesting teacher who was my art semiotics teacher, and I told her my identity, where I come from, what sort of oppression that my people faces, and how I'm not able to express it in design, how I'm not able to form it into compositions. And she was such an important person in my life that she introduced me to the work of the oppressed classes from all over the world, the Palestinian people, the Romani population, the black Americans, and there was so much to learn from them. And that day I became a global citizen. I realized that I do not have to actually see what my neighbor is thinking. I can have friends all over the world, in all the continents. So that day the whole world became sort of mine. I knew that my countrymen will not accept me, but I knew that there are places, there are people with whom I can find solidarity, and not just solidarity, but also find love, and also find a bonding. It was at that time when I made my first Dr. Ambedkar's portrait, 6,000 kilometers away from here. And that was the day I freed myself, and that was the day the colors started to add in my palette, and that was the day I was free to express for the first time. And as I said, this whole journey of telling lies and everything, I was able to learn a lot of mythology because of that. But it was not aligning me with what I wanted to do in my life. So for that, a very interesting person comes in my life, Dr. Ambedkar, with whose writings I was able to focus at one point, and bring my art towards one or two concepts, or a few things that I that I can use to describe the bigger concept of equality, liberty, and fraternity. So while my brain was here and there, even though I had just become a global citizen, but I had to focus to be an artist, and I think Dr. Ambedkar helped me to gain that focus. As I said in my talk, in the beginning, that I was orphaned from my history. Dr. Ambedkar was the one who started to bring me back to my history. This is an illustration I did of Dr. Ambedkar, pointing towards Bhima Koregaon Victory Memorial. And as we were told that, it's a very strange thing that we hear a lot, that, before independence, Dalits were the stooges of Britishers, because some of us used to work for the British government. I do not know which community has not worked for British government, but only Dalits are the stooges of the government. And that also reminds, so Dr. Ambedkar talks about this Bhima Koregaon thumb, because this memorial was made in on the 1818 war between the Peshwas and the British Empire. And during Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj, who is now coined as a very Hindutva sort of person, who was a more secular sort of a person, he started this regiment called Mahar regiment, where Mahars used to be, in the fighting class of the Chhatrapati's army. But slowly, as the empire got broken into Peshwai, the Peshwas were very strict about the caste and about following Manusmriti. And during the Peshwas' time, no Dalit was supposed to be walking around, in the village, on the road, without tying a broom on their kamar, what do you call, waist, so that when they walk, so the road gets cleaned. They cannot walk on the road without a pot hanged, on the neck, so that if they have to spit, they spit on that, so that the land does not get purified. And I think that was the agitation that these 500 Mahars had against their oppressor, who was that time of the same color, of the same country. And that's why they collaborated with the British to fight against them. And that's why we are called stooges, because we fought for our freedom, even though sometimes we have to fight for our freedom from the insiders as well. And Dr. Ambedkar also started to read the scriptures which had very evil things written about us, which we can't even read. Like, if we hear Vedas, then the molten lead will be poured in our ears. If we recite Vedas, then the molten lead will be poured in our mouth. So when Dr. Ambedkar started to read these scriptures, he started to ask these questions: whether do you really want to remain in this fold where you are not even considered human enough? Animals, women, and Shudras, are all on the same plane according to the Manusmriti. And that's why he asked people to rethink about, where do you come from and how do you trace your history? Where do you find connections with? Who is your God? Dr. Ambedkar taught us or gave us insights of these wonderful people who lived throughout the history, just like Sant Ravidas or Guru Ravidas, without whom the Guru Granth Sahib is not complete, or Sant Kabir, whose couplets we still remember and we still try to make into new music as well. These were the people who lived in what I call the Enlightenment time of India, which could have been the Enlightenment era of India, but did not, because the religion got too much heavy on it, and the people like Ravidas and Kabir were forgotten, and it was just remembered as a bhakti era where somebody is just falling in love with some god or the other. But there was more to that era. In 14th and 15th centuries, they came up with these concepts of Begumpura, the land of no sorrow, which is a very communist sort of thought, where the rule of proletariat will be there. And so Dr. Ambedkar reminds of such past, that your people have also written, even they were not allowed to read and write, but still they wrote, and still they wrote so beautifully about a word that is one, a word that is equal. Who does not want that sort of word? And Dr. Ambedkar also introduces us to people like Gadke Maharaj, who was a simple singer who would just walk around the streets of Maharashtra with a broom and ask people to clean their streets. it's a very strange thing that generally lower caste people are asked to clean the streets. It is still the case because the re- in my hometown where my grandmother and grandfather used to live, the cleaning people still doesn't come, and we still have to clean our nalis and everything on our own. I remember last few months ago my father got dengue, and he got dengue because he was cleaning the nali outside his house, because the people of the cleaning people would just not come, or the municipal corporations are just not interested in cleaning these streets. So Sant Gadke Maharaj said that, and that you nobody will come to clean your streets. You will have to clean your streets. You have to be more hygienic. You have to live more, because people do not want you to live more. They just want you to be in your youth and use your labor, and then when you become old, you become useless. So don't be that. Be strong. Dr. Ambedkar also connected us to the word where Karl Marx and Buddha existed at the same time. Where he brings different eras, different time periods in just one book, sometimes in just one essay. So I think that, as I said, that he was making Dr. Ambedkar was the key in making us this global citizen. He did not he also connected us to this primitive word, to the word of Buddha, Confucius and Aristotle living around the same time, and how the whole world was developing ideas in different continents, in different parts of the world, and how we are interconnected even 2000 years ago, 2005 years, 100 years ago. He introduced us to amazing people like Savitri Mai and Jyotiba Phule. Like Savitri Mai is very fondly known as Savitri Mai because she was the founder of first school for women and untouchables. But there's a very interesting story about Savitri Mai where there was a woman called Kalsubai who was a Brahmin woman, a widowed woman who was widowed for 2 years, and her brother contacts Savitri Mai and asks her that my widowed sister has gotten raped, and I do not know what to do, and you please help me to save her honor. And Savitri Mai, like in my head, she says to him that I don't care about your honor. All I care is about the life of Kalsubai. And she tells Kalsubai that you pack your bags and come with me. She goes back home, and she tells the whole thing to Jyotiba, and Jyotiba says, is it wise to bring that woman to our house? It is the problem of the Brahmins. It's their community that doesn't remarry. We remarry. It's their community which have this problem. We do not have that problem. Why should we get involved in that? To which Savitri Mai replies that, in all the scriptures it is said that dogs, Shudras and women are at the same level. So all the women are the Shudras. So why should we not help her? And that made Jyotiba speechless, and that's how they started the first rehabilitation center where women who are widowed would come and can stay. Women who just did not want to get their hairs cut because they were widowed can just come and stay. So these were the people who were thinking about these sort of progressive ideas in the 1800s, and I think this is because because of this long legacy of people trying to protest led to somebody like Ambedkar to come in the picture. It was a long struggle of a lot of people which led to Ambedkar's father work in the British government, in the British military, because of which he had the access to schools, even though he was studying sitting outside the classroom because the teacher would not allow him to sit inside. And this mediocre student, who is not so good at his studies when he is in his primary education because he's sitting outside, becomes this very intelligent person the day he goes to America, the day he goes to Columbia, the day he is allowed to sit inside like an equal. So I think, and there are so many other people like Jhalkari Bai and Uda Devi, who fought against the British army just like anybody else, just like Mangal Pandey, or just like any other people who you remember from the First War of Freedom. Jhalkari Bai, who worked with Jhansi, with the Rani of Jhansi, Lakshmi Bai, and Uda Devi, who fought, during the mutiny of 1857 from Lucknow. I remember living in Lucknow in a place where there was a statue of Uda Devi. And I always used to think that this is Rani Lakshmi Bai because it was made in that way. And there was, it was not written clearly that, who is this. And one day my brother told me that, we were discussing that this is a very interesting sculpture of Lakshmi Bai. And he said that this is not Lakshmi Bai, this is Uda Devi. And then I learned about Uda Devi. She was a sniper who 1857 hid at the top of a tree, and as a sniper, killed these men of British Army. And the commander of the British Army writes about this woman as, who was this man, is, even though it is a very misogynist thing to say, but I can say that now, that who was this man who is killing our, men like this? Who is the sniper that? And when they shot her down, they realized that, it is a woman who has been, shooting these men down. So we also have the history of such people, who have participated in the War of Independence and has also worked, with the British government in the British, as anybody else in this country had. Dr. Ambedkar also introduces us to people like Mahatma Ayankali, who comes from Kerala. And he starts to question that why this land of Buddhism has lost all the Buddhism. And he started to study Buddhism from Sri Lanka, which actually went from India to Sri Lanka to Thailand to revive Buddhism in India. And that's how, that may have been a reason that Dr. Ambedkar, when he went to convert into Buddhism, he already had a platform, a foundation set up for the Buddhism's revival in India. As Nilankur had said that, for most of us, we believe that 26 January 1950 was our Independence Day, because on the midnight of 15th August 1947, there was no book which said that we are equal. There were still holy books, which were followed, but on 1950, there was this new book that comes. Some might call it a holy book, but it is a book that one can change. It is amendable holy book. It is a book that calls everybody equal. This is the first book which is calling us all equal. And that was the day we ceased to remain untouchable. That was the day we became citizens of India. And I think that is why most of the Dalits, most of the Adivasis, most of the people from the marginalized communities love to celebrate Republic Day more than the Independence Day. Most of us did not even know that Independence Day has happened. Dr. Ambedkar, even though when he died, he let us be connected with the world. It was because of him that we were able to connect with the civil rights movement in the US. And there was so much of exchange of information, of literature that happened between Dalit Panthers and Black Panthers, in the time. So this is a portrait where there is one singular crowd for Dr. Ambedkar and Malcolm X. This is an illustration that I made during Corona, and while the whole India was in the lockdown, while we were all working from our homes, there were these laborers who were still working and making this country great or whatever. This is from the time when Vista project was happening and the new parliament was being made, and these laborers, even though we were working from home, these laborers without any safety precautions would still go and make, this country, even though we are told that we are stooges or we are the people who uses most of the ration that comes. But we are not just those. We are also those stylish people, who want to live their life as good as anybody else. I remember this very interesting instance that one of the Congress leaders once asked Dr. Ambedkar that, why don't you wear clothes like Mr. Gandhi? Mahatma Gandhi, wears single piece of cloth, because most of the India is clothless. To which Dr. Ambedkar replies that, my community has been clothless for centuries, and I do not want to see them clothless. I want to see them, in good clothes. You are the people who make this textile. You are the people who stitches these clothes. You are the people who make these commodities. You should be able to, wear them, to use them. So I think this thought has always remained in my head. And it has always given me this confidence that, I can be whatever I want to be. Dr. Ambedkar keeps on inspiring us, our new generations, because we keep his legacy through symbolism. We keep his legacy not just by making him a demigod, but asking questions from him. There are great writers such as Dr. Anantil Tumde, who has not just accepting Ambedkarite ideology as it is, but also taking it forward, because I think, like Dr. Ambedkar had said, that bhakti is the can be the biggest demise for a social democracy. And I think Dr. Ambedkar, it is not just a bhakti that people see. We see him as a messiah, but a messiah that we can contradict, that we can question, as per our time, as per maybe what you wrote in 1920s is not relevant in 2024. I think that freedom, that power to even question that ideology has been given to us by Dr. Ambedkar. So he continues to inspire all the genders from the community, doing all sorts of work, be it in agricultural laborers, or being it IS officers, or entrepreneurs. Dr. Ambedkar has left us with a lot of work that he has written about the history of India, about the social conditions of India of his times and previous. So that gives us a guiding light, that gives us a foundation to form new ideologies, to form new way to go forward in our lives, to make this, in order to make this country more livable, a more just, and a more equal country. He continues, as I said, that he continues to inspire the whole generation. He once said that we are Indians first and lastly, and we do believe in that. But we also believe that India is not just a piece of land. India is the accumulation of different sort of people. I think that respect. So I think the Ambedkar's nationalism is about the people of the country and not just the land that we inhabit. He continues to inspire us in many ways. And this is an illustration that I made because, as Nilankur also told about, how villages used to be designed in a way that the upper caste would live in the front and the lower caste would live in the back. But now, because of these progress and development, there are roads which are now starting from the back of the village. And now, because you have to use the national highway, you have to go through these streets of these Dalit people whom you first would not even let enter in your times. I think it all happened. I think there are so many diversities in our lives, and different people have been inspired by different people in their own demographies. For me, the first introduction, or in my family, the first introduction to the anti-caste movement started with Guru Ravidas and his concept of Begumpura, the land of no sorrows. It was a very artistic sort of influence that was there on my grandparents and on my great grandparents. They produced a lot of poetry around around the Ravidasya concepts. I remember that my grandfather used to write these anti-shlokas of Gita, where because now he understood how to write Sanskrit, so he can make his own couplets, so he can decipher in it in his own way. He started to have these sessions in the Sundays and Saturdays, where people would come because we had a television, so people would come to our house to watch Ramayana and Mahabharata, but not for Ramayana and Mahabharata, but for the advertisement time, where my grandfather would talk about what just happened in the form of Periyar, Sachi Ramayana and stuff like that. So people used to come and enjoy that thing, that these gods who have not accepted us, who has asked for the thumb of our people, are now coming up and making their own mythologies. And I think that's how mythologies are taken forward. When they are talked about, when you become so strict about a culture, that culture just dies. If you want to actually propagate your culture, or actually want to take your culture forward, you have to add things to it. That's how English is working. That's why they add new words to their dictionaries. Why don't we add our new words to our local languages in the name of saving languages? I think it's only natural for change to happen. And I think the Dalit community was the community that really accepted the change that India was bringing with it, with its freedom and with its new constitution in formation. And I was really inspired as I talked about Dalit Panthers and Black Panther Party, coming together, sharing their literatures together. The most inspiring thing and the most important thing for me for Dalit Panthers were them being able to, open up two buttons of their shirts, put it at the back, and walk at as if it is their Babka Road. And it is also because, just 50 years ago, they were not allowed to walk on these roads without a broomstick. So I think that, in just 50 years, they were able to do it. And they were not just doing it as gangsters, they were doing it as gangsters who are poets, as gangsters who are graphic designers, as gangsters who are writers and rappers, not rapping as such, but sahirs, who was almost similar to rappers, and now there are so many Dalit rappers. So I think that style that was there, I think that inspired the generation before me, my father, my mother, to be whatever they want to be, to really think of that road as their Babka road, because our Baps have built those roads, our Baps have built this infrastructure, the temples, the churches, the gurudwaras, everything's has been built by our Baps and our Maas, and now we have started to claim it. And ever since this movement spread throughout the world, throughout the country, and with the exchange of literature, the solidarity also became a sort of international sort of solidarity. I think last year, I was privileged to be a part of 50 years of collaboration between Dalit Panther Party and the Black Panther Party, which we celebrated in Nanded, and we had some of the people from Black Panther Party from the original Chicago chapter. And when they came to Nanded, in a city which is a very small city in Maharashtra, and in a huge auditorium which was full of people sitting even on the ground, and police barrack was placed right at the back. These people came and said Jai Bhim, and the whole crowd was just mesmerized by listening to these folks coming from thousands of kilometers away and understand and talk about our Bhim, whom we love so much. That was also the time where so many people talked about their days as Dalit Panthers. And I remember this one woman, even though there is a barrack of policemen behind, she talks about the days of 70s, where the police was so afraid to come inside their area, that that she tells me that once, she tells it to the whole crowd, that once there was this one constable who came to arrest some of our friends, and she slapped him so hard that the topi, that this cap was flying in the air for 5 minutes, and the police was just standing like this, because there was a time where police atrocity was so much that sometimes when somebody comes inside your house uninvited, you will give them food for 1 day, for 2 day, for a week, but after a time you will want to kick them out, and that's what these people did. It was a very natural thing to do, I think. And for us, the whole movement, in the Uttar Pradesh, was a little haphazard. So the Ambedkar actually reached to Uttar Pradesh through Manevar Kashiram and Mayawati's movement, where they actually did a very interesting thing with the literature. They simplified the literature of Ambedkar and the other people like Fule's and other people. What they did, because the Ambedkar's language was very scholarly and academic in nature, so it was difficult for people to understand it. So what these people did is started to simplify the Ambedkarite literature for people, to simplify it and to translate in the languages of people. And that's how they would, distribute these small pamphlets, these small booklets of Ambedkarite literature, telling them that, as I said, that you are not orphaned from history. You also have a great history. You also have a great future ahead. And that changed a lot of things in us. I remember my father tells me that how his house used to be a kacha house, where they would put gobar, cow dung and mud. And when my father got married to my mother, obviously they will had to make one room which is private and everything. So that was the first room that they actually got plastered. And uh, and with that, the moment of love, the whole house started to become plastered. And it also, was in sync with what Mayavati was doing, because this bold woman with long hair at that time, so all the women of our family used to say that, she doesn't talk, she speaks like a lioness. So all these women get so inspired by her that they themselves started going out and working as teachers and other things. So the whole movement actually changed our kacha houses through these stairs of books to to the viharas, to these houses that we have given our own aesthetics to. We have added our own symbols to, and to make these entrepreneurship places or entrepreneurship organizations and industries where the people, where the occupations which were earlier considered bad, we are trying to commercialize it. We are trying to make money out of it. It was, it is a very weird thing that people say that caste system of India is, is based on the thing that you do or the occupation that you do. Had that been the case, when India had the Manchesters of UK, when we were the big one of the biggest textile industries of the world, why did no weaver community person became a crorepati or a millionaire? When Indians were doing great in leather during 14th, 15th and 16th century, why did a chamar not become a millionaire at that point of time? So even now when you go to Kanpur and Agra, most of these leather industries, tanneries are occupied by the upper caste. So they do not think, it is not the occupation that is there, it is the money and the power that they want to keep with themselves. That is why this whole hierarchy is made. That is why we are born in a caste. That is why we do not get a caste as per our occupation, because had that been the case, different occupations have different golden times and all the castes will be eradicated, all the hierarchy would have been eradicated. That is why it is a birth based thing and it is just theoretically the caste based thing. So even though I talk about the solidarities that we develop, and thousands of kilometers away, but it is difficult to live, in our neighborhood, which is casteist as nature. I don't know what data Nilankush shared about 26% people, practicing casteism. I think 99.99% people follow casteism. I have never been to a place where my caste has not been asked. The first day I moved to Delhi as an independent artist, as somebody who's also known, small places, my mini celebrity. Even though when I moved to Delhi, my neighbor, the first thing she asks is, your name is Siddhesh Gautam, where are you from? Because where are you from is the first step. So the Gautams in the western UP are mostly scheduled caste. Gautams in the eastern UP or Bihar are mostly Brahmins. So she asked me what where I am from. Then I said that I am from western UP. And then she says that what is your caste? And I said that I am a chamar. And she was like, are you married? I said no. And she was like, oh, now the girls in your community have also started to read and write and study. So you will find somebody sooner or later. So imagine, you live in this sort of neighborhood where you do not want to be friends with them or anything. I don't care about these people. Even though I have solidarity, around the world, but sometimes it can be very, very lonely to live in a place where that, people do not just want to accept you. You either, start to weave that lie again that, I'm a Brahmin, then I'm happy. But otherwise, it gets really tricky. But still I am the king in my mind, because I am able to create a word for myself. I am able to create confidence for myself on my own because of the thousands of years of work that my ancestors have done. I have Dr. Ambedkar behind me, and I'm very good friends with him. So we enjoy a cup of coffee every day, and sometimes Savitri Mai joins in, sometimes Pulan Devi joins in, and the conversations go wow. So I really I really like what I have made out of it, even though it was a life of pain and loneliness. But I still like to think that I have created more than 1500 artworks, and I still like to believe in that Disney movie, Disney dream sort of thing, that when I go to sleep, all these people come alive and they have their party. They talk about what they have done to this world in this 24. And I'm so happy that I have met some of these amazing friends who have been creating amazing work from all over the country. This is Shrujna's work, who is currently studying in New York in Parsons, and like like I talk about Begumpura, she and her publication Maveli Nadu talks about this land of Bali where everybody is equal. Uh, she also, talks about, see, these are the Sadhana press is the press from the Dalit Panthers time, and the thing that I was talking about, this leopard print shirt, and so, imagine 70s, these people are wearing these things, and there is this one thing that I always think of, when I think of 70s, I think of Bollywood. In Bollywood, there was this angry young man sort of a thing. He was always coming from a slum, but I did not see any Ambedkar statue in that slum. And I have very, very hardly seen slums without an Ambedkar statue. So I sometimes think that, what conspiracy was that from the Bollywood that, they were so afraid of even an Ambedkar statue at the back. So I think, now people are more unapologetic about where they come from, and they are, I think, the most trendy person in the name of liberty, equality, and fraternity is now Dr. Ambedkar, who was at some point wasn't not even considered leader of the country, but only of Dalits. So she brings a lot of people who are writers and artists of our times, and she celebrates all of them with her work. This is work of my friend Rahi Punyashloka, who has recently completed his PhD from JNU. And as I said about the gaze, you can see here this woman is just chilling and laid back with this bag that she has. She's a Dalit woman, and she does not have to be weak or something. She can be chilling. We come in all shapes, sizes, and forms. You know that. So I think that's what these artists are trying to show to us. This is another work of Rahi, where he also makes Ambedkarite literature a little sensuous, if you can see it. This is work of Priyanka Paul, and who is an amazing artist. They talk about the anti-caste movement, and they also talk about Dalit Christianity, and has been working around it for a very long time. This is work of Big Fat Bao, who comes from a family of a father who comes from Brahmin heritage and mother who comes from Dalit heritage. And she talks about these nuances that happens, the double operation that the women have to go when these intercaste marriages happens. And she is the one who celebrates the women of the community. She's the one who celebrates the food of the community. We have work of Prabhakar. This is from his Berlin Biennale exhibition, where he works on the symbols of that have been used to minuscule us or to ridicule us, and he uses it in a very artistic, in a very thought-provoking way. This is the work of Mayuri, who is sitting amongst us. And Mayuri's work has been very inspiring to me, and the work around the bodies, around the women, and in the textile is just very inspiring for all of us to learn from. They're based out of Goa, so please meet Mayuri. Please, talk to her about her practices. This is work of Somnath, and where he has tried to make this documentation or archival of sahirs of Maharashtra. These sahirs are mostly people who are daily wage laborers in the day and poets in the night. They sing Ambedkarite and anti-caste songs in the evening in the local festivals, and these local festivals are sometimes bigger than the mainstream festivals, because again the amount of crowd that comes in these Dalit festivals or in Dalit celebrations is not is never captured by the mainstream media. But to be honest, if you get a chance to be a part of a 14th April celebration or 6th December, you will see the amount of people that comes and the sort of emotions they come with. So they are trying to document all these sahirs who have been writing through audio recordings, through photography, through archiving their poetry. This is Srivamsi Mata, who is going to come to MOG on 30th. Please do come for this and have a good feast with him. He does very interesting performance art, and we all eat together. And you can also bring your own food to share. This is Vikrant Bisse's work, and he's been working on these anti-caste works. And this is me and my partner Bhumika, who is here. I love you so much. And we it seems like in this I think I wanted to show this because whenever we see Vikrant's work, it feels like we are a part of it, as if we are living inside the work. This is Grace Bano. They are one of my favorite persons of this country, and they are a transgender woman who was the first Dalit transgender computer science engineer. Then they adopted another transgender woman whom they are making a doctor. They are making a colony of transgenders where they can come and live freely and prepare for various jobs and occupations. It is I think it is much more lonelier for them than it is for me to be living in such environments. So I think they're doing an amazing work. I think we are all most of the youth that is creating a lot of work now is because of Rohit Vemula. Because when we were in college, he was killed, he was institutionally murdered, and we were thinking of what our space in this academia, in these colleges are. And I think he was a big influence, not just because he died, but because after he died, the sort of things that were discussed inside the parliament, the sort of things that a minister of I don't know, HRD minister would say about Rohit Vemula and his mother. And it was like, even if a person dies, the caste does not go. So when people say that after we die our caste goes, no, it doesn't go. We even have different burning grounds. So I know that in my family there is only one sanskar that a Brahmin can do, and that is tell date for what to do, and that's all. So if we have to marry somebody, we have to marry them our own. If we have to burn somebody, we have to burn on our own. I was very little kid when I was taking to the crematorium for the first time, and I was sort of taught how to burn a dead body, because nobody else will burn it for you. So I think Rohit's letter actually brought a lot of the youngsters together and have this conversation with each other, that maybe we can sit and be for each other, because there is nobody outside for each other. It seems that way. And this is from Ahmedabad Conflictorium. I think it's an amazing place. If you go to Ahmedabad, please do visit it. It's a very small place, and here it is written, "I am sorry, Rohit." So it is on the floor. They have written it down in different languages, because we all feel even though we also belong to his category, to his community, we also were not able to make the academic space safe for him. So we are also sorry that we were not as upfront as we are now, back then when he was suffering from it all alone. And because of all these things, our works have started to find places. It is, if you can find them in institutes such as IITs and IIMs, and all these, where people were still questioned about their merit in the name of reservations. We have started to put these work in these colleges, so that at least some of the students will not feel so orphaned when they are in those institutions. The representation that we talk about in academia is because of that. Because when I was in college, in two of the best colleges of this country, I could not find a single educator to whom I can go and say that, how am I feeling and how can I be better. So I think that representation is important for that. So now when I go to these colleges, go back to my alma mater, I really tell it to my class that be confident. You can always write to me when I'm gone from this college, even if this module is over. But I really hope that these colleges have the sort of representation, so that what I had to go through, others do not have to go through. When I had to go 6,000 miles away to find a person who can listen to my story, they don't have to do that. Had that happened in the first year of my college, I would have been a very confident, and maybe, my trajectory would have been very different, and I would have been a very much more confident human being. So I try to find ways to get my work in different places. As Nilankur said that this is my first exhibition in a gallery setup, but I've always been doing exhibitions such as these, where I've been putting tents in the middle of somewhere in a city like Surat or Pune, where we put these artworks, these cheap prints, and we put these all, and we train some students from colleges to explain these things to people, so that they should also not remain orphaned from their history. So a lot of people who would else not come to these galleries. I think my work is because of these masses, and if it doesn't reach these masses, then I'm not doing, then I'm a very selfish person, and I'm just doing it for myself. So I think it is important that it reaches these people, it reaches kids, women, men of all ages, of all shapes, sizes, colors, and everything. And and yeah, and this is the whole Dalit history, that we are people too. Just like your history, we also have history. Just like you come in different shapes, sizes, and colors, we also. Just like you are swaggers, we are also. Just like you like to chill, we also like to chill. We are as humans as anybody else, and I think that is what freedom means to me. And if, and this is not something that we have achieved. We are in the process of achieving this, and I think we have to come together. We have to not just tolerate people, but love people, and love people's culture, exchange culture, make new cultures. Let's not just be strict people who just want to save something which will not be saved, because change is inevitable. And so is equality and liberty and fraternity, which is coming. So hop on the train before you sit. Thank you very much.